You are listening to the Practicing People's Podcast. I'm CJ Hammond.
And I'm Jordan White. Together, we'll be taking a journey into the practices that help us align with our mind, body, and soul.
So take a deep breath, release, and remain curious as we explore new ways to enhance our lives.
All right, welcome to the show, everyone. So excited for today's conversation. Today we have with us Whitney Johnson, honored with the 2025 ADT Talent Development Thought Leader Award, is a top global management thinker ranked by Thinkers 50. As CEO of Disruption Advisors, she transforms Fortune 500 companies and startups alike through strategic organizational development and executive coaching. With clients including Kraft Heinz, Morgan Stanley, and Amazon, Whitney combines Wall Street expertise with insights from co-founding the Disruptive Innovation Fund. Her best-selling books and popular podcasts, Disrupt Yourself, influence millions globally. And based in Lexington, Virginia, she enjoys gardening and making homemade jam with her family. Whitney, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
That's quite the credentials, I would say. Very impressed. I've done a little bit of research on you myself, but in the wonderful bio that you have, what else about Whitney Johnson might you say that's not in that wonderful intro that you might add to that in addition to who Whitney Johnson is as in addition to those things?
That is such an open-ended question.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what, I will add, and I'll pick up on something that we did before the show started, which I think is really beautiful. And I hope that you've shared with your listeners that you do this. We did a grounding exercise before we started. And I think that is just so lovely to help us all get into sync with each other and to be able to relax and to show up as our best selves. And so something that I would say that isn't necessarily in my bio is that I am focused, maniacally is probably the right word, on how do I improve myself as a human being. And I have actually been studying Reiki, which is a study of energy. And I think it's fascinating and interesting. And so the opportunity for us just to pause and to think about our energy was really powerful. To think about not only the power of our thoughts, but also the power of our bodies to be able to calm us and to help us make progress. So our thoughts impact our bodies, but our bodies impact our thoughts. So that's something that, I mean, there's a lot more that's not in my bio that I can tell you. I'm married, I have children, all those things, but I think that's a good place to start.
Amazing. I would love to add on to this now, as I'm curious about something that I'm pretty sure we're going to get to dive into, that maniacal pursuit for improvement. I'm curious, how does one find the balance between remaining as present as they can be and that drive for the best of themselves? How does Whitney go about finding that and then tell others to do the same?
Well, much of the time I do it very poorly. I think that, it's interesting because I think oftentimes we toggle between, okay, things are good. I'm just going to kind of go along with how, sort of float along the river, if you will. And then I think sometimes we have an impulse to really like, I'm going to go down that river as fast as I can. I want to be on the rapids and I'm going to make progress. I think that one of the big journeys for me personally is how do I moderate that so that I am focused on progress and at the same time doing it in a way that is kind and not with a bludgeon, and giving myself grace in the process as well as everybody else around me, so that there's a sense of spaciousness and expansiveness of, okay, yes, I want to make progress, but not because I'm hustling to make progress, but because making progress is about unfolding as your whole self.
Wow. Starting off with some instant, just wisdom and getting into it. I mean, it's powerful to hear you just even talk about that. I mean, especially in today's, kind of hyper speed world, where you could literally order something on Amazon and it'll show up the same day. It seems like a lot of people have that same mentality
Yeah.
about their personal growth and, becoming a better leader, a better parent, or whatever it may be. So I'm just wondering, about you and just kind of your journey with this. Where would you say some of the journey around your work that you do now,
Mhm.
with the tool that you use and smart growth and all that, like where was there kind of a distinct starting point there? What do you recall about kind of getting started with this?
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, I love the fact that you can order something on Amazon and get it the next day, right? Don't you think that's a beautiful thing? I want to read a book and it's here. I mean, it's magical when you actually stop to contemplate what is able to happen so quickly. So I think that's really an amazing thing. I it's an interesting question to ask about that personal journey of when it started. It's interesting because if I think about when I was in high school, I don't know that I would have described myself as not really being driven, or certainly maybe I was driven, but I was rudderless. I didn't know where I was going. But there have been a few times when I've talked to friends that I had in high school, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, you knew exactly where you're going. You knew exactly what you wanted to do." And so I think sometimes there's this disconnect between the experience that we're having as human beings and how other people are perceiving us. Um, I would say though, um, where perhaps it really started is that I graduated from college. I had gotten married to my husband, and we had moved from Utah to New York, and he was getting his PhD. And I was having this experience of I had gotten a job as a secretary because I was a music major because it was the late '80s, and the reason why that's important, it's the late '80s, is because I was a woman in the late '80s. I continue to be a woman, and the best job that you could get was to be as a secretary. And so here all of a sudden, I was in this place of I graduated from college. I had really good grades. We needed to put food on the table. I'm around all these super, super, super high achievers. And at some point, and maybe because I was settled now because I was married. So it's interesting because sometimes people talk about marriage being challenging, but for me, it was very grounding. And so at this point, this sense of ambition and what could I do started to really kick in. And I do recall as I'm trying to make progress and I'm not making progress as fast as I want to, I start wondering, like, why am I not making progress? Yes, I might need more school and I might need to study more. But that set me on this search of reading people's work like Sally Helgeson's The Female Advantage and trying to understand, what do I need to do? How do I need to change? How am I going to navigate the workplace in order to be successful? And so I think there's probably other different checkpoints along the way, but I think that that was a really important checkpoint for me, is getting myself into a situation where up until that time, if I study really hard, if I practice the piano really hard, I'll be able to get what I want to do. And now all of a sudden I'm in this situation where working hard isn't going to be enough. And I've got to figure out how I need to change and how I navigate these organizational dynamics. And so that put me on this journey of reading books and trying to understand, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be successful? Because the playbook that I had before that wasn't quite working.
I, in saying that, I from what I've seen, it seems that there was a transformation, a second transformation, then from the corporate world into the entrepreneurial world. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Can
correct for
can
sure.
you then tell me about, so from that next transition? Can you tell me
Mhm.
what that transition was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that transition, so it could look like it was overnight, but it wasn't overnight. So if you start to look at the timeline, if you look at, it's now, I've been working on Wall Street for about 15 years. I've been an investment banker. I've been an equity research analyst, institutional investor ranked, so award-winning analyst. And I kind of hit this point again where I'm not making the progress that I want to. Around the same time, I read Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma, which is all about disruption. And I have this aha that if I'm going to make the progress that I want to make, that yes, I can continue to make money. Great. That's awesome. We want to make money because we all need to eat. But the emotional job of being able to feel like I'm growing and developing isn't going to happen. And so I remember actually reading The Innovator's Dilemma, and I almost can see like on the page where I was reading it, where I had this epiphany or this aha that if I'm going to accomplish what I want to accomplish in life, that disruption that was about products and services could actually apply to Whitney, and that I would need to disrupt myself. And disrupting myself meant that I was going to need to leave Wall Street and this very exciting, wonderful position, but go do something a little bit more entrepreneurial and figure out what that could look like. So this was now in 2004, 2005. So basically 20 years ago now. So that was the next big epiphany of, oh, again, as you notice, there's a sense of I want to grow, I want to develop, I want to make progress. And I'm in a place where I can't make progress in the way that I want to. And now at this point, I had the language of I need to disrupt myself. I need to leave where I am and I need to go do something else. And so that was that next big pivot point.
My curiosity is, did the identification of the language lead to the disruption? Is it that you were like the soul knew, and then the reading led to the language that led to the identification of this is what needs to happen? Was that the link?
That's a great way to articulate it.
Okay.
It's a great way to articulate it. And there's something, I love how you said that, the soul knew. And it's interesting because there's a theory called the jobs to be done theory, where when you take a job, you hire the job to do a job for you. You hire it to do a functional job like make money, put food on the table, and you also hire it to do an emotional job. So Wall Street was doing the functional job. And to some extent, it was doing the emotional job of like you feel a sense of status because you're working on Wall Street. But the emotional job, which goes to what you just described, which is the soul, that deep part of yourself, that wasn't being done. I could feel that I wasn't actualizing, if you will. And so reading Disrupt Yourself, no, that was the book I wrote. Reading The Innovator's Dilemma gave me language to describe the experience that I was having that then propelled me to make the decision to leave Wall Street. I'm not sure my husband loved that decision. He did forgive me eventually. He didn't. I say that jokingly. It's not even true. But making that decision, but to your point, CJ, the soul knew. You read something, it gives you the language. And when you get the language, then it makes it easier to act on it. You've all heard the phrase, name it to tame it. We love that phrase. Why do we love that phrase? Because what it does is it takes the emotion, it puts a label on it, it gives it a name. And when you do that, it goes from being this inchoate sort of, I don't know what to do with this. It makes it precise, which then allows your executive functioning brain to start to think strategically. And so what you just described, you name it, you can tame it, you can act on it.
Amazing.
Yeah. Disrupt Yourself was actually one of the books that inspired me to move from one job to another. So just by the way, thank you.
Oh, I love that.
And as we're talking about it, I'm just, in the work that I do as a coach, and, CJ's even has his own version of disrupting himself, uprooting from Colorado and going out and, to LA and pursuing a whole new, life essentially. But I'm curious about, kind of what you experience, going into organizations and maybe even in, kind of personal experiences or other relationships. This idea of disrupting, I don't know if that's met with resistance at times, and like guess the reason I asked that is it seems like a lot of people want to have the formula and
Yeah.
want things to be like really sure and, um, you know, do this one thing and then it should lead to this thing. And then if these 4 employees do this thing the perfect way, then we'll have this perfect machine. So
Uh-huh.
this idea of just disrupting
Yeah.
yourself, I'm curious about if you've met that, if that's been met with
Yeah.
resistance.
I have so many thoughts that are coming up for me. So one thing I would love to do is I will answer this question, but I'd love to go back to CJ, what you did to disrupt yourself. I'd love to hear that story as well. Even though I know your listeners hear it, I'd love to hear it. But also one of the things I would say, Jordan, is that the interesting thing about disruption is if you think about personal disruption, maybe let me go into a little bit of a definition. So, when you think about disruptive innovation, what is that? It's where you've got a silly little thing that's like at the low end of the market. It's a toy, like the telephone was to the telegraph, like um, Netflix was to Blockbuster, like even, you could say WhatsApp was to the telephone. I mean, just they're kind of these silly things. But then all of a sudden they get better and better and better, and then they upend the market. So they're disrupting the product, the existing product and service. Well, what happens with personal disruption though is that you are the silly little thing and you're the incumbent. You're Netflix and you're Blockbuster, you're TikTok, or excuse me, WhatsApp and you're the telephone. So you're disrupting yourself. You are the incumbent and you're disrupting yourself. And so what happens when you're doing that is you're building new neural pathways. It's this deliberate process of self innovation.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult. Why? Because in order to disrupt yourself, you're giving up a piece of your old self. So the price of a new and better self is your old self. And the challenge with that is that your old self has served you. You are your old self because you got to where you are. And so it was at some level very valuable. Even if it was dysfunctional, it was still valuable. And so the price of that new and better self is your old self. That is like ripping off a leg. A leg. I'm like a leg, an arm or a leg. So what that means then is that we all want to disrupt ourselves, but it is very challenging. We want to be disruptive as a team, but it's very challenging, which is part of the reason why we were talking about AI at the beginning. Actually, we were talking about AI before we started and how wonderful it is. Part of the reason why, even with all of the wonderful, amazing, incredible technological advances, those are actually, in my opinion, going to precipitate the need for people to figure out how for human beings to work together even more. Because as the pace of change accelerates, our ability to manage that is we don't quite have the ability to manage it. And so it's going to be even harder to figure out how to work together. So it's going to be even harder to figure out how to disrupt ourselves. So back to your original question, yes, we want to disrupt ourselves. And yes, the actual doing of it it's the quest of a lifetime, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have a question for you about the state of disruption. How
Mm-hmm.
does one differentiate? And I think about this in the corporate world, but I'm thinking
Yep.
about this on the personal level as well. How does one differentiate the difference between disruption in the positive and it's just taking time and
Yep.
the negative and it's not going to work out? Because it feels like in the business world, should you present a disruption, the
Mm-hmm.
business end goal pursuit would be to the numbers need to be established, productivity, and
Right.
there might in that disruption be a fall off, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and we say we got to nix this because we didn't see this, but you're just asking a company to take time in that. Have you run across that type of
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. So yeah, to your point, there's positive disruption and there's negative disruption. And I think that oftentimes what can happen is that when people are under pressure, they start disrupting kind of like, let's do shiny new object that will make us feel better. but there's no actual meaningful change. There's no actual numbers or ROI to suggest that it actually worked. And so, ironically, really meaningful disruption is early on going to look quite gentle. It's going to look quite incremental. It's going to look like we're not actually doing anything that big. But for example, let me give you a simple example. So oftentimes in an organization, one of the biggest challenges people have is communication. We're not communicating with each other. What's happening? So you can say, well, let's put in Slack. Let's put in, let's find all these really high tech solutions for us to communicate better. When there's probably something very simple you could do, which is we're going to have a practice of every time you get an email, you're committed to return it within 24 hours, period. Always. So that people feel heard, so they feel communicated with. Or we're going to have a practice when management goes to an offsite for 2 days, that when you come back off the offsite, you are going to communicate to everybody else, here's what we did, here's what was left undone, here's where we're going. So they're very simple things to do, which over time, there's a cumulative and compounding effect. There's a contagion effect. So those very simple practices, which is disrupting yourself, over time lead to meaningful change. And so those are the kinds of things that you do that lead to positive disruption as opposed to change, kabuki theater, change just for change's sake.
That is, I believe your explanation there is so beautiful on so many different levels of relationship, whether it be work, marriage, friendship. We always look for that shiny object. Like you said, I can't tell you how many times I've been in like, well, let's go to Slack. I'm like, well, we don't even answer the texts that we're going through right here. So why would we add another level of this thing to get to a thing? So that was highly profound on many different levels. Thank you for speaking on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so before we go too much further, can we hear CJ's disruption journey?
You absolutely can.
Your flow and hear it?
Absolutely can. And I would say this, it's something that we talked about prior to the beginning of this podcast. I was in a job up until 25. I had graduated and I had no idea what I wanted to do or where I was going with my life. I had a very stable, wonderful life there, and the stability was all external. Internally, I was very unstable, very unsure about what my soul was calling to, and had an opportunity where I began modeling out there on a literally a whim, on a thing I thought I was going to something else. And I was fortunate enough to sign with an agency who then got me out to California, and I said I want more, and so I started doing commercials, and then that's led to acting, and now I get to do all those things. And again, it was what you're both talking about is something that I kind of want to refer to that we had talked about at the beginning, Whitney, and that was faith. This weird drawing that I think that there's a calling that is the whisper that is always at your back, but pushing you forward, never the against. I know my doubts can certainly enter, but the godlike nature that knew that I wasn't crazy. And there was something that you referred to in the age of Amazon, and it can't be duplicated in this reason. It's the magic that man can make versus the miracles that God can do.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, and the magic that man can do, it's the instant process. It's the things that we can snap like this. And if I know that I am the seed and I am also the fruit, it's the time in that takes to come to fruition, where God and the miracles that I see and the weird, sort of like, how did that happen? I've dreamt of that? That came true. And I know you've been on stage thinking, how am I here right now doing these things and speaking in front of these people when 10, 20 years ago, there's no way I could have seen those things. So the faith and the miracle that God is in my life have led me to this point to have even this beautiful conversation with you and this nice simpatico understanding of what that looks like. So that's my journey. It's much longer than that, but in a
Yeah.
short nutshell, like that's
Yeah.
kind of where how I got out here.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm sure you've probably gone into more detail into it on other podcasts,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah,
but
we
thank you for sharing with me, I appreciate that.
I appreciate your interest. No, it's but
Mhm.
again, that's why I see so much synergy between what it is that you're speaking about, especially in the land of entrepreneurial ways that
Mhm.
Jordan knows about, that I know about, that you absolutely know about, where it takes this weird faith and a constant disruption and sort of like you said, this maniacal pursuit for this betterment of self, but also wanting to be grounded and centered at the same time. It's all these crazy things, and that's why to bring up now is something that I saw in reading was your S curve. And you
Mhm.
talk about the S curve a lot, and I see a lot of ways in which that can greatly benefit me and take pressure off me. Could you explain to the
Yeah,
audience a little
absolutely.
bit about what
Yeah,
that?
and Jordan obviously knows the S curve very well
Yeah,
because he's
very.
been through certification, but, I will run through it, and then Jordan, you can tell me what I missed or what you think is useful in it. So, one of the things that was very interesting for, me is when I was working with Clayton Christensen and we were investing, we would use the S curve, and the S curve was, originally popularized. It's been around for decades and decades, but it was popularized by, E.M. Rogers back in the early 1960s, and he would use the S curve to understand how groups change over time. We then used it at the Disruptive Innovation Fund to understand, how quickly an innovation would be adopted. But then I had this aha, and so you're gonna see this pattern because I was thinking, how do you apply disruption to individuals? I had the aha of, oh, we can apply the S curve to individuals. We can use it to help us understand what growth looks like and perhaps more importantly, what it feels like. So there are three major parts to the S curve. And actually, before I go through those three major parts, I'm going to tell you that it answers three questions. Number one, why is it hard to start something new? Number two, why once you start, is it easy? And number three, why can you be really good at something, even great, and feel like you can't keep doing it? So the S curve answers those three questions. Now, there are three major parts to it. There's the launch point. The launch point is a place where your brain is running a predictive model. It has a hypothesis of I'm at the launch point of this curve, and I'm wondering what is it going to take for me to go from the launch point or the bottom of the curve to the top of the curve. As it's running this predictive model, because most of the predictions are inaccurate, dopamine, which is the chemical messenger of delight, it de-delights, it drops. So the feeling that you have when you're at that launch point or the bottom of the curve is this is really uncomfortable. This is really awkward. It's scary. You feel impatient. You might even feel like an imposter. And what's interesting about this place is that it's not that growth isn't happening. In fact, when you're on the launch point, growth mathematically is happening at its fastest. But because you can't see the growth, the experience you have is just this is really slow. And this is where you ask yourself that question. I thought it was a good idea to move to Los Angeles, but now I'm not so sure. I thought it was a good idea to start my new business, but now I'm not so sure because I'm feeling so uncomfortable. This must be a bad idea. Well, what the S curve does is it allows you to say, oh, maybe it's a bad idea, but I don't know yet. I don't have enough information. What I know right now is I'm doing something new and it's uncomfortable and it's awkward. Situation normal. I'm at the launch point. So now you know what it can feel like to do new things, and you can use it to talk yourself through really challenging situations. So that's the launch point. Takes a long time for a little bit to happen, but then at some point you hit that tipping point. So you go to the steep, sleek back of the curve, and this is the place where your predictions become increasingly accurate. So dopamine starts to spike. You have these emotional upside surprises. You feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. You feel exhilarated. And this is the sweet spot of the curve. And this is the spot where people don't tend to talk about. They talk about the launch point. Oof, this is so hard. they don't tend to talk about the sweet spot of this is so much fun because they don't want to feel like they're bragging. But the sweet spot is that place that we want to be in as much as we possibly can. And then you get to mastery. And mastery, so now you're at the top of the curve. Now, mastery does not mean that you are the world's foremost expert in being a ukulele player. What it means is that you've done what you came to do. What it means is that you've figured out that predictive model. It means that you're no longer learning at the same pace you once were, so you're not getting as much dopamine. So, what happens in mastery, if you think about the S curve as a way to understand what growth looks and feels like, in mastery, you now have this dilemma because, on the one hand, you like being at the top of the mountain. You like being the master of all you survey. You like that things are super familiar, but your brain also needs more dopamine. So now you've got this dilemma. Do you stay here or do you jump to a new S curve? Or do you do something that allows you to go back down to the sweet spot of the S curve? So if you're about growth and we're wired to grow, you make the decision, I'm going to jump to a new S curve. I'm going to introduce something new so that I can continue to grow. So you've got the launch point where growth feels slow. You've got the sweet spot where growth feels fast and is fast. You've got the mastery where growth slows down. But this S curve now gives you a way to describe and articulate what growth looks like and what it feels like. And you can use it over and over and over again, whether it's at work, whether it's taking on a new hobby. With relationships is different because you want to be in the sweet spot as long as possible. But when you're thinking about skills, moving to a new town, becoming a new parent, the S curve is incredibly useful in helping you navigate the emotional journey of change.
Thank you so much.
It's so powerful. And as Whitney mentioned, yeah, I'm certified in this tool, and it's been incredibly valuable, not only as a coach, but just even recognizing my own journey, right, of being an entrepreneur and even in leadership wise, I'm like, I think we're all leaders regardless of our title or not. We're leading ourselves, we're leading our family, or if we're involved somehow in our community. So to normalize growth is just such a profound thing, and to give us the language to talk about it and to also back it up with what's happening at the human level is just, and even within our brain and our emotions, and just to connect the wholeness that happens with growth and change is just, it's so incredibly useful to really have that awareness around that. And something else that I took away deeply from getting certified in the tool is also the environment. So making sure there's an environment that's conducive, and even if we're not in a corporate space, like what environment are we creating for ourselves? To honor growth. So I'm curious if you don't mind expanding a little bit on the environment.
So if you think about the S curve as a mountain that you're climbing, you can think about it. Okay, so you're being agentic. You're making the decision. I want to be on this particular S curve, this particular mountain, and I'm going to do this work. I have to do it by myself, but I can't do it alone. And so then you say to yourself, well, what are the conditions like? Is it sunny? Is it breezy? Is it snowing? Is there hail? Like what's happening? And so that ecosystem or that environment is going to either help you or hinder your being able to climb that mountain. And so one of the things that we often think about is that, well, how is the ecosystem affecting me? Do I have a boss that I can work with? Do I have teammates that I can work with? Do I have people who report to me that I can work with? And recognizing that we are in an ecosystem that's affecting our ability to grow. And at the same time, taking responsibility for the fact that we are also creating the ecosystem. So one of the things that my co-founder, Amy Humble, likes to say is it's oftentimes a sense of it's snowing, but the fact is we are snow. We are creating that environment. And so there's a symbiosis there when you think about the growth that you want to occur in your life, in your career, is the ecosystem's affecting you, but you are affecting the ecosystem. And that, and what do you want to do with that?
Yeah. And in the self-leadership program I guide people through, we talk about accountability as a skill that you can build. So what's your ability to take things into account, your
Mm,
choices, your
mhm.
actions, or lack thereof, right?
Yeah.
I've been guilty of sweeping things under the rug and be like, well, that should maybe go away later.
Uh-huh.
What what's my ability to actually take into account my contribution to this current reality too? Because a
Mhm.
lot, it's pretty easy to
It's
finger point,
oh,
right? And to,
so easy. Yeah. So two things that come to mind, Jordan, is one, I have a favorite saying. I have lots of favorite sayings, but one of my sayings that I like is no pancake is so flat it doesn't have two sides,
Mm, mm,
which
mm.
I just love, right? It's just like, well, and from a coaching perspective, and I think this goes to, and you probably use this as well, is when you're working with yourself or someone else that you're coaching, is when they say, well, there's this, and the ecosystem is this, and my boss and my manager and my colleagues, and et cetera, is to ask the question, okay, so if that what percentage of this, if we assume that even 1% of the situation is within your control,
Mhm.
what would you do differently?
Mm.
Because there's always at least 1%, right? At least 1%. It's probably more like 5 or 10 or 15. So
Right.
allowing ourselves that ability to say, huh, okay, well, what is within my control? And then once we ask ourselves the question, what's within our control, then what do we want to do? Which goes back to the disruption piece, which is we all love disruption when everybody else is changing. And it's not us changing. And I find this is true for me. It's true for all of us, is that we think we don't have very much control, but the reality is that we don't have control over lots and lots of things. We have a ton of control over lots and lots of things, but we don't want to change the stuff that we have control over because it's really hard.
Mm.
Yep.
Oh, are you speaking to me right now?
Yes, I am, but I'm speaking
Yeah.
to myself too.
No, it's I'll say this because I want to leave a little chunk of time here because there's so much wisdom that you've provided. Given all that we've gone over, are there learning lessons that you might impart on somebody in your journey of, as we said, things take time, disruption can
Mhm,
be
mhm.
uncomfortable, things like that, personal anecdotes, more sayings that you might impart on the audience, that I just feel like there's so much that you've had to have seen in this time
Mhm.
that you can impart on some.
Ooh, that is an open question. Can you maybe? I mean, I can start spouting
I,
stuff,
I'll
but
say this, but
yeah,
perhaps
give me a
for
more specific question.
for an entrepreneur,
Yep.
for in
Okay.
regards to an entrepreneur, are
Okay.
there words that you might impart on them in the lessons that you've learned in your own journey?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with let's go back to I'm going to start with two and then we'll see where we go. The first one is we were talking about this earlier about the S curve and being at the launch point of the curve. And how when you decide that you're going to disrupt yourself and you're going to do something new, and now you're at the launch point and it's starting to feel really uncomfortable and you're feeling really incompetent and you haven't found product market fit yet. One of the things that I would say is that you want to be very aware at that point is, am I feeling uncomfortable because there really isn't product market fit? What's the data telling me? Or am I feeling uncomfortable because I'm doing something new? So being able to tease those two things out. So if we go back to what you said earlier of like, you know what, I feel like God called me to do this. I feel like my soul is calling me to do this. And my friends and family, or at least people that I trust, sometimes friends and family struggle because they've got a little bit of skin in the game. But people that I trust are saying, you know what, Jordan, you know what, CJ, I think this path makes sense for you. And you're just feeling really uncomfortable, is being able to be aware of that and persist a little bit longer and then get some data before you give up too quickly. At the same time, is that you're going to sometimes get data that is telling you this doesn't make sense to do. And to be willing, once you get that data, to say, okay, I need to jump to a new S curve because this isn't a good fit. And to be willing to observe that and see that. And so I'll give you an example. This is probably about 10 years ago now. I was working on writing my book, Disrupt Yourself. So more than 10 years, roughly 10 years, working on writing Disrupt Yourself. I'm also in the process of working with some individuals to raise a fund to invest in women entrepreneurs. And I really wanted to do both. And the data was telling us that we had been working very hard to raise money and we couldn't raise money. Like people just did not want to invest in that. And I was staying with it and I was staying with it and I was staying with it. And finally, my husband said to me, because he's a great truth teller, number one, you're not raising the money. It's not happening. Number two, you need to choose. And you spent all this time and all this energy on disruption. That's where your momentum is. You need to chase that. So that would be the first thing that I would mention to you is this idea of when you're at the launch point of the curve, it's very important to look at the data to be able to suss out what's discomfort and what's product market fit.
Mm.
That's the first thing. The second thing that I would say, and this goes back to one of our accelerants when you think about personal disruption, is to be willing to take the right risks and play where no one else is playing. And one of my favorite sayings, again, another favorite saying, if I had children for favorite sayings, I would have lots of favorites, is that amateurs compete and professionals create.
Mm.
Love that.
And when you're looking at building a business as an entrepreneur, when you're looking at building a life, you want to find ways to play where other people are not playing. And more importantly, to play where you can uniquely play. So sometimes you'll think, oh, I've got a great idea, but other people are doing that idea. You're not uniquely qualified to do that idea. So how do you find and focus on what do you do uniquely well? What are your distinctive strengths? What is something that only you can do? And play there. So amateurs compete, professionals create. Now it's harder to create because there's it's new. Like there's no territory. You have no projections. You have no evidence that it's possible. So it goes back to what you're talking about earlier. But when you're really creating and doing something new, it takes a lot of courage. But that's where you're going to be able to make this idiosyncratic contribution is playing to your strengths, play where other people aren't playing. And then again, be willing to adjust with the product market fit, but don't give up too soon because you're feeling uncomfortable.
Mm. If the audience could see, there's a mic dropping out of my hand. To piggyback off that really quickly, there's this thing that I've strongly come to believe. It's not just in the actions. It then becomes about the adjustments that you're willing to make. And Jordan just reminded me of something in that. So it's like a triangle of A's. It's actions, it's being able to make the adjustments, and then the accountability in that.
Oh, I like that.
You spoke to all those. So I've been flooded with your wisdom today, Whitney.
Yeah. I want to just say that again, because I think that's really powerful. So Jordan, you were saying there's a triangle of like, first you act.
It's actions. And then I've always said it's actions and adjustments. It's being able to take action and then make an adjustment. And then there's a third piece of this that Jordan just reminded me of. And it's when people make adjustments, there's also a level of accountability that has to come with your adjustments, because you can make an adjustment for a day. Like if we're doing a diet, I ate broccoli for a day. Am I doing that consistently enough to say I'm accountable to say that's an actual adjustment that's there? Or was that just for the day to say I tried it? You know?
Right. Okay.
So
got it. Yeah.
the action is, everybody gets the high from the action. And then the adjustments is where we're kind of like, am I doing this right? The accountability kind of is also satiating in the sense it goes, I'm doing this.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And like, I love that, the idea of AAA. And you just reminded me, so there's a sense of, actually, so Bill, so we talked about the S curve. So when you're at the launch point of the S curve, you want to celebrate because you started. So when you celebrate, then that reinforces. You in the sweet spot, you want to celebrate, like you just said, because you're doing it, you're in the middle of it. And then when you're in mastery, you want to celebrate because you did it. So you're celebrating at every single point along the way, and you're reinforcing with that positive, the dopamine and the serotonin and all those things. And if you're able to celebrate at every single point along the curve, at the action, the adjustment, the accountability, then that's also going to allow you to make the change and accelerate the change.
Man.
That's and also, yeah, just kind of the takeaway too from going through the certification and even doing my own work with this is you start to become friends with change and you start to look forward to it. And like,
I love that. You become your friend.
Versus, it can feel uncomfortable, and that's part of it, right? Like once you embrace that, I mean, that's a piece of this. So, a big part of what CJ and I are about, and I anticipate you having plenty to say about this too, Whitney, about it's really the practicing people's is about what practices can we implement that not only help us become better and grow, step into new versions of ourselves, but what's the impact that is going to have on our surroundings, the people around us, the world at large. So and that's one of my last questions is what's if you were to kind of share your vision around if people were committed to their growth at this level that we've been talking about today, what do you see?
You mean what would happen in the broader world if people were committed to their growth? Is that the question? Okay. So I would say a few things, and maybe let me back up and then I'll go there, just because I know that you had wanted to know some concrete practices, and I'll just talk to those really quickly and then look at the broader growth. So one of the a number of practices. Number one is my faith, combining the secular and the spiritual. I've got the practice of thinking about the S curve. That's really a mental model, but it's very helpful. I have a practice of journal writing and reflection. And I try to walk 10,000 steps a day. I think a lot in terms of 5% better. So starting small. And I also have a practice, which I do a little bit intermittently, but writing letters from my future self to my current self as a way to encourage myself to make change. In terms of all of those practices, one of my goals is, and then I'll go to the impact that it will have, is that I want to, on the day that I die, the day that I leave this planet, I want to be the happiest that I've ever been. That's my goal. Now, obviously, at some point, if I live a long life, my body will get frail, and that's okay. But am I the most at peace that I've ever been on that day than I was at any other point in my life? So in terms of the impact, what I would say is we all know that if you look at investing, there's a cumulative and compounding effect. If you invest money, it's going to continue to invest and continue to grow. There's another wonderful piece of research around the contagion effect, that if you are happy, then your friend is going to be happier, and your friend's child's going to be happy, and your friend's child's school teacher is going to be happy. This wonderful contagion effect. So sometimes I think we think that if we are different or we change, it won't matter. But there is a wonderful cumulative and compounding effect of when I am willing to disrupt myself, to do just a little bit different, to do things just a little bit differently, to smile at someone, to compliment someone on their outfit in the airport. And you're willing to do something a little bit differently, Jordan. And you are too, CJ. And you too, Andrew, Mr. Producer, who we can't see right now. If we're willing to do all those things because of the contagion effect, the impact that we're able to have is so much broader and so much grander than we can imagine. And so what I would say to anybody who's listening is be willing to start small, be willing to do 5% better, knowing that you're going to have a much bigger impact. For ill, you can also do things that don't help people, but that's not what we're talking about today. Really focus on the things that you can do that are going to make a difference for you. And as a consequence, they will make a difference for the people around them.
That is a huge amen to all of that. Whitney, I am really, I feel lucky to have this conversation with you today. You brought a lot to a lot of wisdom here. As we finish out, Jordan, I'll let you finish it, but please tell our audience in what ways they can find you, whether it be through the books, website, all your social medias. Please let the audience know how they can find
Yeah.
more resources from you.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is number one, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Second thing I would say is, I just have a spontaneous idea. If you send me an email at wj at the disruption advisors with an o.com and tell me what you learned today, I will send you a signed copy of my book, Smart Growth. That's my offer to you. And then the third way is that I have a podcast. Jordan was a guest at one point on the podcast called Disrupt Yourself. And so you can go listen to some episodes there.
Can I send an email as well? Can I be in on that as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, make sure.
no, you're excluded from the offers.
Please
Yes,
go
of
tap
course.
into Whitney. Please,
Yeah.
everybody that has the ability to, because this conversation was amazing. I really thank you for this. Jordan, I'll let you finish out, but thank you, Whitney.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Sounds great. Yeah, Whitney, thank you so much for the time. And as CJ said, just the value you brought and just the person you are. The fact that, I got to meet you in person and that you just, made everyone there feel so comfortable, especially at the level of impact that you've had in the corporate world and, just like society in general. It's special to be around, and for you to be here, we're truly grateful. And please know you've had a huge impact on my growth journey as well. So thank you again. Please come back and have a chat with us, sometime down the road. And I just know you've got two huge fans in us.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's been super fun and 45 minutes, I think, well spent for all of us. So thank you.
Absolutely. You're going to be seeing an email from me.
All right, Whitney. Until next time, thank you again. Thank you for joining us today on the Practicing People's podcast. We hope you found our conversation inspiring and thought-provoking. We appreciate your support and passion for personal growth and self-improvement.
To help build the Practicing People's community, please follow us on Instagram at Practicing People's Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and engaging discussions. Liking and sharing our posts will spread the word about the podcast to others who can benefit from these conversations. You can also reach out to us at our website, www.practicingpeoples.com, for more materials and ways to tap into the community.
Leaving a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform is a valuable way to support us and help potential listeners discover our show.
Remember, personal growth is a journey we embark on together. Let's build a community where we uplift and inspire one another to achieve our true potential.
Thank you for being part of the Practicing People's podcast family. And until next time, keep practicing and keep growing.